Alright guys, so today we actually came up with our top 10 4-star operators in Arknights. So one thing that I really enjoy in Arknights is that even though a 4-star may have a 5-star or 6-star counterpart, it doesn't make the 4-star obsolete. In some cases they can even be better, or they can be used side by side with their higher rarity counterparts. So that's a really good thing I really enjoy about how they create the operators in Arknights. So with that, we can start with the list. Alright, so starting off the list is actually a 4-star who was released a long time ago, and that's gonna be Ambriel. So just in case you guys don't know, Ambriel isn't a unique archetype. She is a wide-ranged sniper, same as Firewatch and Adriana, and she actually has the highest base attack for any of the 4-stars. Sorry, all of the 4-stars, and that's true for the wide-range sniper archetype. So Firewatch and Adriana also have the highest attack for the 5-stars, while the 6-stars it's going to be Poca or Rosa, who is a completely different archetype, but we won't go over that. So what makes Ambriel so good? So Ambriel is able to hit outside her attack range. So with skill 2, you can have her hit globally. Now there is a downside to this, which is the slower attack speed, and she has to cock her gun. So there's a lot of animations that makes this really slow. But since she's a wide-range sniper, all wide-range snipers have the trait wherein they target the lowest defense enemies. And if you add this with her second skill, which makes her range global, she will essentially be looking for the squishiest enemies and killing them. And this skill can last upwards of 40 seconds. So this skill can last up to 40 seconds, and that's a really long duration for a skill. So for 40 seconds, she's gonna be removing all the squishy targets in the map, and most of the time those will be drones or casters, which are really annoying to deal with. So she's able to remove some threats, and Adriana and Firewatch, who are the 5-star counterparts, are not able to do this since they cannot extend outside their own range. And she also has a chance to stun them when she's using this skill, since her talent actually gives her up to 28% chance to stun a target outside the attack range. So that's really good. Coming up at number 9, we have Click. So a lot of you actually might not be familiar with this operator because she's relatively new. So we did receive her in the Twilight of Walmund event, and a lot of people actually ask me what she does or how useful she is. And the thing is, she's actually a new archetype, so the closest thing we can compare her to are single target snipers. So let me just explain Click. Click is actually part of the drone caster archetype, and she's the first operator of this archetype. So in this archetype, essentially every time she hits, there's another unit, which is this yellow thing that's following her, that's also hitting. Click and this yellow thing have the same attack speed, so they will be hitting pretty much simultaneously. So even though Click has a relatively low base attack, she's gonna be hitting twice, so multiply that times 2. And there's actually a bonus that if the drone is hitting the same unit as Click, it will actually do 10% more damage. So that's pretty good. And this is actually really sad for another 4-star operator, which is Haze. So if you guys don't know, Haze is a single target sniper, and her skill 2 reduces her HP but increases her attack and attack speed. What's really sad though is that Click, whose skill 2 doesn't have any downsides, gives her increased attack range, gives her attack, and gives her a chance to stun the enemy for upwards of 50%, since there's 2 of them, Click and the drone. She actually makes Haze really obsolete if you compare them. So in 95% of these scenarios, Click will out DPS Haze while still giving your team some free crowd control. So she's able to stun the enemy. She doesn't have any HP penalties like Haze. So that means that even if she gets hit by something like a cannon, which is an AoE from the enemy, she won't die that easily. She also has a bit of more health compared to Haze. And yeah, the increased attack range you get from the S2 is actually really useful. So she gets another 2 tiles, and most of the time that will help you clear out really awkward angles. And trust me guys, the stun will hit almost all the time. Like, her attack speed is really fast. And by the way, that's another thing, she has more attack speed than Haze since she's a new archetype, and her talent actually gives her an additional 12% attack speed. So that's really funny. So yeah, she has a basically she does a lot of DPS. There are no penalties, and she gives your team a free stun. So this usually operators who are primarily for DPS, they don't give your team any free stun. So this is really useful. And the stun isn't really that long. It can last up to 1 second, but considering Click's attack speed, you'll almost always have the enemies stunned. Alright guys, so next up we have Utage. So Utage is actually a zombie guard, and zombie guards are my favorite class in Arknights. So these type of operators like to play solo lanes. They do have their own self-sustain, but they cannot accept healing from allies. You can still heal them indirectly, for example using Perfumer's talent. So yeah, she's a pretty good guard in that she can also do arts damage, and using her skill 1, you could also passively regenerate HP. And there are actually a few strategies you can do with this. For example, you can use her on Iridium tiles, and she'll be able to dish out a lot of damage, and whenever there aren't any enemies, you can just heal her HP up so that she doesn't die. You can also use this to tank Faust. So if you guys don't know, Faust is a boss that targets the last deployed operator, and he will still keep targeting Utage even if she's healing and she has 0 blocks. So that's really good because you can just sustain all the hits from Faust using Utage. So that's a pretty fun thing to try out. Yeah, there are also a lot of scenarios where she can perform better than Hilagur, particularly against high defense enemy. And keep in mind also that Utage is usually used as a heli drop because her skill 2 activates as soon as she is deployed, giving her arts damage as well as half HP so that she starts with faster attack speed. So Hilagur isn't a heli drop operator, meaning that when you place him in a tile, you expect him to stay there for a really long time. Utage, after she deals with a high threat enemy, you can just get her out right away. So she's a really good guard, and she isn't replaced by her 6-star counterpart, which makes her really viable. So up next we have Gravel. Gravel is a really strong operator in that she isn't DPS based like her 5-star and 6-star counterpart, which are Phantom and Project Red. So she's a fast redeploy operator, and at 5 DP she's extremely cheap. With her skill 2, you can obtain a shield that absorbs damage equal to up to 250% of her health. And if you add this up, essentially Gravel would have around 5,000 health. So 5 DP for 5,000 health. That's all you need to know. That's how good she is, and you can just use her to bait out some really critical shots. You can use her to bait out a few shots from Faust. There's a lot of things you can do with this, but essentially just think of it as you're getting 5,000 health for 5 DP, and you can use it really often. So there's a lot of things that you can use Gravel for. That's why she's so high up in our list. At number 6 we have Mei. So Mei is actually a single target sniper who can stun and slow the enemies, and in my opinion she's one of the most overlooked 4-star operators in Arknights, and probably the most overlooked character in this list. So the thing with Mei is she doesn't sacrifice that much DPS for her skills. She still does a lot of DPS with free stuns and slows. So she fits anywhere you put her. You can put her with your team together with another sniper, or in some stages maybe you just need one sniper. That could still be Mei. So she's a really good pick. She doesn't necessarily replace the stronger single target snipers like Eyja and Blue Poison, but she can work alongside them and even help them. For example, if there's a caster ban or a defender ban and your guards are leaking out some enemies or they're just being overwhelmed, Mei can actually help stall the enemy for them, and she still does a lot of DPS. So long story short, she's a really good versatile pick. Number 5 is going to be our last guard for this list, and that's going to be Cutter. Cutter is a really solid dual strike guard. If you guys don't know, there are only 2 dual strike guards right now. That's gonna be Chen and Cutter, and by the name you can already assume what they do. So dual strike guards hit twice every time they attack, and so far all of the dual strike guards are SP on hit regen type. So that means every time they attack an enemy they get 1 skill point. The thing that makes Chen really good is her consistent damage. So she has a lot of damage as well as the nuke potential with the skill 2 M3. But Chen's skill actually takes twice as long to use, because it will take 20 to 30 skill points to use her skills. But with Cutter, you only need 11 to 15 skill points to use her skills, so you can spam it more often than Chen. Her damage isn't bad, it's actually really good. Of course, it's really hard to compare her to her 6-star counterpart who focuses on damage, but if you're using Cutter, she's actually a really solid pick, and you can use skill 1 for targeting a particular enemy, and you can use skill 2 for targeting mobs. And her skill 2 actually also targets drones, and it actually deals double damage to drones. So in some stages where those purple drones, she can actually one-shot them. So she's a really strong pick in my opinion. She is definitely going to be how do you call this? Definitely going to be a solid addition to your team. Although one thing I would like to mention is Cutter isn't someone who can just fit any team. You kind of have to build around him. So for example, let's say Mei or Podenco. These are characters which you can just slide into any team and they'll add value. For Cutter, you actually have to build or adjust your team around him just to give him a spot to play, but she's still really strong if you choose to do that. At number 4, we have Cuora. So Cuora is actually a really good defender, and in 95% of the scenarios where you need a defender, Cuora is enough. Cuora will do a defender's job. She doesn't stun enemies, she can't hit air units, she doesn't do anything special. She's just really good at being a defender. With her skill 2, she will stop attacking, but she will have an increased block count, so a total block count of 4. She'll have up to 130 defense increase, and she'll also recover her HP every second. So if your healers are having a hard time sustaining her, she can actually help sustain herself, and she's just a really solid defender. You'll be able to use her almost anywhere where you need a defender. So that's why she's so high up in this list. Not to mention that she's a really cheap option. But personally, I do prefer Bubble over Cuora. That's just my preference because I do like the gimmick with Bubble. She's kind of like a mini Hoshiguma. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Alright guys, so we're down to the top 3, and I want to start this top 3 with Podenco. So Podenco is a really strong slow supporter, and I just want to mention that slow supporters aren't usually a priority for Elite 2, which makes Podenco even better because she's a cheap Elite 2. So if you look at all your operators, you probably already have like 2 or 3 times more guards, more snipers, more defenders compared to your supporters. That's because you build supporters later on. So Podenco is a really good choice to supplement, for example, your Angelina, or if you want a second slow supporter, she's still a very good choice. You can put her with any team and she will fit, she will have value depending on the skill you use. She's very versatile. So first of all, her skill 1 changes her attack type from attacking enemies to healing allies, and keep in mind that slow supporters have 1.9 second attack speed, while healers or medics will have 2.85 seconds attack speed. So that's a very significant difference. So she can heal faster, and slow supporter also has a bit of a higher attack stat. But if you compare Podenco to, let's say, Shining still has a little higher attack, but since she has faster attack speed than the medics, she will actually out heal any medic, AoE, single target, as long as they're not using skills. She will out heal them. So she's a really good burst healer, and imagine you deploy her just for almost a bit over half the cost of a expensive medic. So let's say Shining costs 20 deployment points, Podenco only costs 12. So you deploy Podenco early, you help your vanguards by killing a lot of the enemies, slowing down the wolves who could have escaped, and then later on the enemies are getting tougher. You need to heal your allies, so you can just pop Podenco's skill and heal your allies. And it's a very useful skill for certain maps where you only need to heal your allies every now and then. Or you can also pair her with, let's say, Myrtle skill 2 or Jay skill 2 and just throw your medics completely. Like, you don't really need medics. You can use her with Saria skill 2 as well. So there are a lot of skills that can heal. But the point is, Podenco is a very versatile unit. You can use this to heal your allies for a lot more than most medic operators will be able to heal. So the other thing is, her skill 2 is actually better than her skill 1. So her skill 1 sounded really nice, right? Her skill 2 is a lot better, in my opinion. So her skill 2 only costs 23 skill points if you max it out, and it essentially is a slow utility. You will throw a spore cluster and it lasts for 6 seconds on the ground, and this will slow all enemies that step on it. It will silence them. So for example, if you do this to a spider, they cannot explode. It will also deal 80% of Podenco's attack as magic damage per second. So that's a lot of damage, guys. And this skill, as soon as you throw the bottle, it will start recharging the SP right away. So it's a really fast recharge skill. It's only 23 skill points, so you'll be able to use this skill almost every enemy wave. Almost every enemy wave you'll be able to use Podenco's skill. So it's such a good piece of utility, and just because of this skill, especially in tight areas, she can be very useful. Usually she'll clear out the weaker enemies and your team can focus on the hard-hitting enemies. So all those slugs, the spiders, the wolves, she can one-shot those just with the skill, and then your team will be able to handle the weakened, stronger enemies, like maybe let's say a defense crusher or something like that. So this is why she's really good, and you can pair her up with other supporters. She doesn't need to compete with a spot for supporters. You can play her with Angelina, you can play her with Magalan, you can play her with anything, and yeah, her talent actually does help other supporters. So yeah, she's a really versatile unit. I definitely recommend building her. Even if you already have Angelina, Estina, and Magellan E2, you can still build her, and she does have her value. Oh yeah, the spores also hit drones, so that's a very important detail. So yeah, one more thing I like to mention about Podenco is she is a all-in unit. So you cannot, if you promote her to Elite 2 and you leave her at skill 7, she is significantly weaker. So I recommend that you max out her skills in completely Mastery 3, because every time you rank up the skill, the SP and the magic, the SP cost will be reduced, and that's the main thing. Of course, the damage and the duration of the skill will also increase, but the main thing is the SP costs go down, so you can spam her skills a lot more often. So if you plan on building Podenco, I recommend you do skill 2 Mastery 3, hands down. It's very worth it, guys. For skill 1, that depends on you. If you want to use her often as a healer, you can definitely work on her skill 1. She's only a 4-star, so the skills are really cheap. Alright guys, at number 2, it comes to no surprise that we are getting Jay. Jay is a recently introduced specialist in the EN server, and he is really good in sustaining himself as well as in helping allies with their sustain. So he's a pretty good specialist. He's the first DP tax specialist we've received. This archetype cost only a very small amount of DP. They also have fast redeployment, as well as the negative side, which is every 3 seconds they will eat 3 deployment points. So when they eat 3 deployment points and you run out of deployment points, they will automatically get retreated. They are this expensive because the skills are activated really fast, and they're actually very useful. So his skill 1 allows him to have a infinite duration ability that gives him attack boost and silences the enemy's special skills. So for example, with the exploding spiders, they cannot explode anymore. You can play him solo lane as long as the enemies don't overwhelm him, and even if they do overwhelm him, the rest of the enemies will just go to your main team. He will still probably be able to sustain. At number 1, we have one of the best Vanguards and the queen of DP regen, Myrtle. So Myrtle has really weak stats, and she is a utility Vanguard, and this archetype doesn't have any block when their skills are up. So she's very prone to leaking, as well as her weak damage. Even if she's not blocking, she can easily be passed by other enemies. So she gradually obtains up to 14 cost while using her first skill, and the second skill she can obtain up to 16 cost and heal her allies, but it takes a lot more SP to use. So most people just use the first skill, and I do recommend just using that. I personally do use both skills. I have both at Mastery 3, but yeah, for general use, just use the first skill. So if you use Myrtle with another Vanguard, let's say Elysium or Texas or Siege, you 100% of the time be able to set up your team without any complications. So she's a really strong utility Vanguard. She's used purely for her DP. For example, Texas, you can use her for DP and stall. Siege, you can use her up to end game because of her stats. But for Myrtle, it's purely for her DP. She's just really good at dishing out giving your team a lot of TP really fast, and that's what makes her so strong. Especially when they released Bagpipe, so you can almost instantly activate Myrtle's skill with Bagpipe's passive. So there's a lot of operators that you can use with Myrtle. A fan favorite for me is using Myrtle and Elysium. Normally you'd expect a lot of things to leak, but if you are able to activate Elysium's skill, you already have 1 or 2 DPS units down because of how much DP they both generate. And even if you're up against, let's say, something like wolves, they won't leak most of the time because Elysium does have a slow debuff, so you can place out all your units. You can place out a sniper and maybe 1 guard or 2 snipers, and you won't have any problems with the leaks. So yeah, it's a really strong Vanguard, and I definitely recommend all players to build her.